Thank you for joining us for another Offsite Construction Series. I'm your host, Audrey Geodesic on Offsite Dirt. We are talking about domes, like the Epcot domes. It's a special series today because we're bringing a little bit of background on how offsite construction actually really started. I'm so excited to have Scott Hickens, my partner in crime. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Audrey. Thank you for having me today.
I'm certainly happy to have you. We talked last year, and actually you were the first one that brought this special person to me that was really kind of like the godfather of offsite construction. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about our special guest, Bucky?
Absolutely, yeah. And so when we first met, like you said, I was excited to bring you the story of Buckminster Fuller. So for people who aren't aware, he was an American, you could say, scientist, engineer, philosopher, architect, all of the above. Kind of has that mad scientist thing, but instead of going out there and creating crazy stuff that no one can use, he was actually dedicated to solving the most important problems that we have: housing, taking care of everyone, and using the least amount of resources to preserve our planet. And he has a great quote that is going to be a model, I think, for the offsite construction industry going forward, which is: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Bucky was trying to do that back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, doing a lot of the prefab and offsite construction methods that are so popular today.
I think that's so funny because, you know, as we're expanding in our industry, we're having these conversations on Offsite Dirt. We also have to reflect back on those that have done it so well and never got any credit. So, you know, it's nice to see that Bucky was this pioneer, as we like to say, and to see the interesting things that he has designed and the ways that he has built them is truly so imaginative and innovative.
It really is. People call him sort of the Walt Disney of architecture and construction, where essentially if you could imagine it, there's a way you could do it. And, you know, Audrey, I come from a messaging, media, marketing background, which is why I'm especially interested in making sure Bucky is an important part of the story that we tell about offsite construction in America, which is why we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, and I think I kind of forgot to lead you in, Scott, and I apologize. You're with the Art of Construction, and really, why don't you just give us a brief understanding of exactly what your organization does?
Absolutely. So I'm the executive producer and marketing director for Art of Construction. So we started as a podcast, one of the number-rated podcasts in the country about the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. We're dedicated to breaking down the silos between all the different parts of the industry and bringing them all together for one conversation about how we can drive our industry forward. And then within the last year to 2 years, we've actually become a firm led by Executive Director Matt McMullen, who you interviewed earlier today. So not only are we talking the talk about how to push the industry forward, but we're actually walking the walk through modular and prefab projects that we are doing. And what you could essentially condense our description to is we're an R&D lab for how to really push the construction industry forward, talking about all these great building methods and materials, and then using them on actual projects.
So getting back to our conversation on this special 2022, what was Bucky's design philosophy?
So the best way to describe his design philosophy is less with more. He was all about the idea that scarcity, this idea of this scarcity, there's not enough to go around for everyone, is a lie. In reality, we have the technology, we have the materials to take care of every human, not only take care of them, but at a higher standard of living than ever before. He truly believed that that could be attained if we all had the correct knowledge on what we could really do with technology, what we could do with the resources we have on this planet. And he used those design philosophies to create and few inventions, most notably the dome that we're going to go into.
I love it. You know, actually, in last year, I was actually in Walt Disney World, and we actually did Epcot Center, and the dome is such a prolific icon of that area and the imagination and the innovation that came from that. I don't know how many people really know that Bucky was like the founding father of that design.
He really was. So the geodesic dome, for people who aren't aware, is the structure that covers the most amount of volume with the least amount of surface area. So there is no other structure that can give you as much space on the inside while taking up the least amount of materials on the outside. And it is made of triangles instead of rectangles. So when we think of the homes that we have today, we think of all these right angles. So the dome worked in a different way based on a bunch of interlocking triangles. And of course, it was all prefab. You could make kits and you could ship out the kit, and it has all the materials to put together the frame, and then have prefab triangles of any material really that you wanted. That part was up to the consumer, the person living in it, to put over the frame and create that dome.
I think the other thing that was so genius about what he did was he actually kind of like Sears Home, it was like a kit of parts. He brought them to the site and he literally showed people how you can actually install components, more or less, on site.
Yep, exactly. He actually lived in a dome himself, which is still there in Carbondale, Illinois, and I believe is preserved as a sort of national landmark. It was built in 12 hours. And behind him in this picture right here, you see one of his most notable ones, which is in Montreal, Canada, and actually houses a science museum in now, which is very fitting. But yeah, you know, this was a very practical invention. The military actually used these domes to create structures for their soldiers all over the planet. It was very popular for usage in greenhouses. In Hawaii, there was actually a giant concert hall that was used. Here's an example of one of the greenhouses. But so throughout all of Bucky's life, he was actually commissioned by all sorts of people all over the world to design these geodesic dome structures because people realized this could be the future. This is how we do less with more. And the full version of that quote is, we need to do less with more. I mean, no, I have that backwards. We need to do more. We need to do more with less until we can eventually do everything with nothing.
Love it. It makes me like, it gives me chills because I almost feel like he was like this spiritually conscious person as well as humanitarian.
He really was. So if you read his life story, when he was in his 30s, he was essentially at the road's end where he didn't know what was going to happen with his life. He was broke. And he has this very spiritual awakening of sorts where he says, you know what? I'm not doing anything for money ever again. I'm not doing anything to fit in ever again. I'm just going to dedicate to myself to pushing humanity forward. That's all I'm going to do. And you know what, Audrey? That's what he did. And the rest of the world resonated with what he was doing. And he was never at his road's end again. Through all his friends, the network, the people that purchased his designs and used his designs, he lived a very comfortable and successful life well into his 80s, essentially preaching this idea of doing more with less and understanding that we are all on Spaceship Earth. So Epcot, what you're talking about at Disney World, you know, they call it Spaceship Earth, which is this other philosophical idea he had to make people understand that we only have one planet. We're all in this together, and we take care of it.
You know, it's interesting, Scott, there's such a parallel to what you're saying because there's most of the people that you listen to, like not only spiritual people, but business-minded people. And a lot of them say it's about service. Once we start changing our mindset to service and to helping others, all the other pieces kind of fall in place. We start meeting the right people, we start coming up with the right ideas, and we really truly do connect each other instead of separate each other. I think it's so great for us to have this conversation and to honor him, especially on this day when there are so many people out there searching and feeling like maybe there's a little bit of less hope out there. But if we can start realizing it just takes one little small piece of helping one other person, and whether it be in construction, whether it be in business, whether it be at a school, whether it be wherever you're at, if you can help one person, if you can have one idea and share it and know that you're doing something for the greater good, we seem to start realizing that we're a smaller planet Earth, we're a smaller area of people that are like-minded, people that actually want to do better and to show that we can actually take care of each other. Are there any other plans or any other things that Bucky did that people might not know about him?
Well, there was really a ton of things. I mean, he invented a car called the Dymaxion car, the Dymaxion house, which was actually the first attempt at prefabricated housing before the dome, but none of them were actually built. But I just wanted to circle back real quick on what you were talking about, Audrey. He was obviously a very profound philosopher with all these ideas. And so he had this idea of a trim tab, which is a smaller rudder on a larger rudder that improves the efficiency and overall effectiveness of a vessel. So usually a trim tab would be on the back of a boat, kind of in the little part of the rudder. He had this idea where on a trim tab, it is this tiniest part of a boat. And yet you move that trim tab and it ends up moving the direction of the entire boat. So this littlest piece is actually responsible for the direction of the whole vessel. That was his philosophy for, like you were just saying, Audrey, how to show the effect that one person could have. And in the offsite construction industry, as we've talked about, Audrey, I don't think people give themselves enough credit for how many trim tabs there are in this industry, really working hard to shift the entire world in a better direction. And so not only was he inventing these actual structures and these actual design philosophies, but he was also showing sort of philosophical mindset that we need to get into this creative, innovative space and really create something that will bring all of humanity towards a better direction.
And I love that you were saying that he wanted to help all people, right? And I think we're kind of in that same systemic issue that we're facing with not only homelessness, but affordable housing. And what really is affordable housing? You know, you look at it and it's not even affordable, it's not even obtainable at this point. So we need more leaders, we need more pioneers, we need more people to be brave. We talk about Elon Musk and him finding, you know, Boxable and having a solution to helping people have another opportunity to live. And I think in offsite construction, we're starting to get a little bit closer, trying to figure out where we can do cost savings, trying to figure out how we can come up with these solutions and help others. Because in the end, when we help others, we truly help ourselves. When we fill our heart with love and we actually move in that direction, there's so many profound things that can happen. On the topic of Bucky Fuller, why do you think it was so important that he was so brave to be able to go out and be like, no, I'm going to try doing this? Like, what was it in him? What do you think it was?
Well, he really felt a connection to all people. And in his lifetime, some architects liked him, Audrey. A lot of architects hated him.
Kind of like where we are now with offsite construction.
Because they saw him as a very much potential threat. Because these domes, Audrey, if they could be built in 14 hours, if you could send them a kit so a homeowner could do it themselves, the architects weren't necessarily jumping for joy about that. But in the end, he wasn't focused on all of these, you could say, artistic threads happening within architecture. The way he designed was that the solution to a practical problem came first, and out of that solution came something beautiful. That was actually another one of his quotes, where he says, I don't design according to beauty, but if at the end of my design it is not beautiful, I know I've done something wrong. And so this was a different way to look at how you design structures, which is not based in any of these admittedly wonderful, more aesthetic threads that some of the greatest architects in the country have built upon to create all the wonderful structures we have in our commercial cities. But it was actually a way to give the residential homeowner a way to understand where their home actually fits into the overall process of what we're doing, which is a lot of what we're talking about with offsite construction. When you want to sell it to a homeowner, you know, they don't really care as much about the science of, you know, that's what we're doing, is figuring out the science to build something in a factory. What they care about is they're contributing to the planet, they're using less materials, they're using the most efficient forms out there, And even there was even a passive cooling element to these domes, Audrey. So something called the reverse chimney effect. If there's any passive house people out there who want to give this a quick Google, there was even a passive cooling element to these houses. So this autonomous net zero concept and the prefab concept way back in the 40s, he was taking that not just to specialists, he was taking that to the general public and saying, look, this is what's possible. This is the direction we should go in. And I think when we have the situation that we're in now, Audrey, I think that's what we're going to need to do is bring these big ideas to the public, because I guarantee you they all feel a part of Spaceship Earth as well, and they'll be on board.
You know, you were talking about how architects didn't like it, they felt threatened, and I almost feel like this is such a parallel time in where we're faced right now. 5 years ago, when I started Modular SureSite and doing my own residential modular projects, I met over 100 builders in the state of Colorado, basically in Denver, sitting in front of them, talking about this new solution. And it really wasn't a new solution, it was an old solution. But talking about how there were so many benefits. There were the benefits of ease to being able to get your project done, the benefit of sustainability, the benefit of less disruption on site, all of these things that Bucky kind of found and walked into and found these solutions. And the interesting thing about it is, Scott and I, you and I have talked about it. Many of those builders, many of those developers that I pleaded with and talked to 5 years ago are now seeing, ever since, COVID, the horrible thing that has happened with the country kind of shutting down and people being more inside and, not being able to get out there and build these big, huge projects because we had to have all these precautions, which are fine. But the reality is that we do need to have sophisticated systems. We do need to start entertaining ways to build not only faster, but of more quality. And we also have to realize that things are going to shift. We have to be more adaptable. And when I see the builders now, a lot of them are even looking at the offsite solution of panelization. We were just talking with a guest, Integra, and Integra does panelized systems, as you're aware, Scott. And even with Jerry, it's about the solution. It's about creating something that eases the amount of time on a work site and being able to duplicate that process, right? Being able to do it better, faster, more efficient. And that's where offsite construction really is this amazing thing that we're starting to finally have these conversations. It's not this quiet little conversation that's going on. It's a bigger mindset. And I think getting back to Bucky Fuller, for him to be that genius and to be that brave, because we can be out there having these conversations. We're starting to find like-minded partners. We're starting to find manufacturers. We're starting to find innovation and technology and people that are bringing software and development into the fold. And now we had somebody all the way back like 80, 90 years ago that was brave enough to walk in those shoes. I think it's great that we can honor him, especially today. And I think it's great that we are seeing more innovation. We are seeing more people that are learning from what happened in the past and bringing it into the future. Are you seeing some of the things that he has brought to this dome and this philosophy? Are you seeing any modern day type of individuals that are doing this?
Well, as far as modern day examples, what I would say is just this overall idea of the design builder, I think, is moving towards what Bucky was really trying to show as far as how this stuff comes together. So I have a little quick anecdote. Audrey, the quote where you say, jack of all trades, master of none?
Yes.
So that in modern business world has been made to seem like a negative thing. So you're saying, oh, you're a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none. The actual parable from ancient times is jack of all trades, master of none is always better than a master of one. So the actual parable is the reverse of what we think of it as today, is it actually encouraging people to be a jack of all trades. So when you think of Buckminster Fuller, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, he was a design scientist, is the best overall way to say it, but he was also an engineer. He was also an architect. He was interested in everything from boats to cars to houses. when you think of our industry today, Audrey, it's especially siloed. And like I was talking about art of construction's mission to break down these silos. If you think of any of the best structures in our planet's history, take the Great Pyramids, for example. There was for sure not a drawn up pyramid, and then someone was like, okay, let's figure out how to build it. All the best structures in our planet's history that withstand were essentially design build structures, where whoever had the mind to come up with a design was also coming up with the way it was going to be built. And that's what Bucky did with these domes. He was essentially the sole design builder of this entire structure, where he knew how it was going to be designed, he knew how it was going to be built, and it creates a really beautiful structure, like you've seen in some of these photos. It's, you know, people think of it as this kind of this weird futuristic thing, but look at this. This is a beautiful structure that has rooms, that has a lot of space. But so to answer your question, Audrey, more than just like a single individual, this current IC of bringing together all of the different minds, engineering minds, architecture minds, and construction minds, and bringing them together on one project. There's not this red tape of liability, and this person just does this part, and this person that does that part. We need the cohesive vision of all these people put together to solve the problems that we have. And Bucky represented that in one person, where he just spent all day, every day, going from here to here to here to here and here and bringing it all back together. I think there's a really good thread right now in the AEC industry to bring people together from all trades and bring people from outside of the industry. Maybe there's a systems theorist, right? That's another thing Bucky was, a systems theorist. Bringing people from outside of the AEC industry who might understand something about the science of how to bring things together. I really think the offsite construction space is beginning to understand that when we bring all these diverse minds into one group of people, we're going to get the best solution.
I agree with you, and I love that you're saying it's about collaboration. And I think the other thing is it's all about conversation and being able to have all different types of individuals from all different areas, because no one solution works anymore. We have this housing crisis. We have these, these areas of business that need to start collaborating, understand that we're all here to service the greater good. We're here to help others. We're here to grow. We're trying to find solutions. The solutions aren't happening fast enough. So when I look at offsite construction compared to traditional, there will always be a need for all of these tools, right? But how can we come together and collectively work together, not only from, Bucky's standpoint of, innovation and bringing all these different tool sets together, but also in the current day of what we're being faced with. We're being faced with challenges like illness and sickness and being able to have a healthier home and trying to find solutions that we can actually do a quicker subdivision or a faster, well-built quality construction for individuals to live 100 years in a house instead of 20 years and then having to remodel that house or do something along the line to make it healthier. I think the exciting thing about what's happening, especially on Offsite Dirt, is that we're opening these conversations. It's not one fits all. It's about talking from East Coast to West Coast. What's happening here and why is that happening? And having these conversations with all types of individuals. And I think that's kind of where, when we kind of put our heads together, Andrea, you and I, and we started talking about how we can do this deliverable and really start meeting people and having these conversations, it's about information. It was so hard for me 5 years ago to find out this information. It wasn't accessible. It wasn't relatable. I didn't even know where to start. And it's one conversation after the next and really doing searches and talking to people. And that's what makes it exciting, Scott, that you're on the other end of that and you are finding these solutions and you're finding these really creative people that are in the industry. I mean, really, you brought Bucky to me, and after watching that documentary, I was completely sold on him.
Yeah, I mean, it truly, if you watch that whole documentary, which I imagine, or I encourage everyone, you go on YouTube, it's called Thinking Out Loud, and it's a Buckminster Fuller documentary. It truly brings to a tear to your eye, because it's just truly a person who, like we said way earlier in the conversation, the only thing that occupied his mind was how to take care of all of humanity. And a lot of the information about the things he's done, as we've talked about, it's scattered all over the place. There isn't necessarily a giant organization that you can just readily find everything about him. It's very similar to Nikola Tesla. If you think of that, Nikola Tesla really invented all this stuff about free energy, but it's very all over the place. And again, he was a very spiritual person who kind of came from that mindset. So I see those two figures as very similar. But to bring it back to the dome, I think, Audrey, we might see a renaissance of this dome architecture. For everyone to know, the Geodesic Dome design, Bucky had the patent. He has long been gone. This is a public domain design. So any architect can hop in and create their own version of the dome. There's many companies all across America who kind of create these kit parts. And talk about 100 years, there's this really cool story, Audrey, about, you remember how I mentioned the military commissioned Bucky to create these little dome structures for them. There was this spot of land in Cambodia, I believe it was, where there was all these leftover dome structures that the army had used. And then this giant tornado or hurricane, some sort of crazy natural disaster came in, and the entire kind of 100-mile region that this had happened to, every building was destroyed except for those domes. The Bucky domes that the military had used 80 years ago actually survived this natural disaster. And it's because the dome structure doesn't require a beam. It doesn't require any sort of all of the usual things that you would think of how to hold a structure up. It actually holds itself by its shape. And the bigger it is, the more stable it is, according to this principle called tensegrity, which is tension and integrity. And again, it goes back to the pyramids. There's no one beam holding them up or all these different structures. And so this is the kind of information, Audrey, people are afraid to sort of look too out there as far as the design of the dome. But if you really bring people the information that, hey, if you want something that could last 100 years, it's going to be way cheaper because there's way less material. This sort of architectural design, the Geodesic Dome, might be for you. And I think we might be very surprised how many homeowners and consumers might be on board when they understand that. And so, like you said, it's all about the information. And Bucky had a quote that we actually showed earlier in this conversation where he said, "We don't have an environmental crisis. We don't have an energy crisis. I'll also add, we don't have a housing crisis. There is only a crisis of ignorance."
And that is the perfect way to close. Thank you so much, Scott, with Art of Construction. Thank you for bringing Bucky to me. Thank you for this conversation. It makes me so happy to see us celebrating him once again.
It absolutely does. When you do something truly for all of humanity, as we're talking about, Audrey, it lasts forever. We're trying to make homes that last forever and build upon these ideas that can last forever. So thank you so much for having me. It's quite fun to think of the journey we've had so far of me first talking about this stuff with you. So now we're here a year and a half later having this conversation. Offsite Dirt is such an important platform to get those stories out there, and it's only up from here.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you for being here. Think about being innovative. Think about what's happened in the past. Open up the discussion, have the conversation, bring more people together. That's what we're doing today on Offsite Dirt.